Welcome to episode 6 of the Liminal Space podcast. This is Tristan
and Rashid.
And today we're going to talk about home and belonging, and perhaps suggesting that those could exist even in a liminal space or in liminal spaces. I am from East London, as I've said many times. I'm quite proud about that. And I moved to Cape Town almost 2 decades ago now, which makes me feel...
Ago?
I think it's 2 decades ago.
That's great.
It was in the 2000s.
You're old, bro.
I'm not old. Having moved from East London to Cape Town is quite an interesting thing because you come into the city as this outsider, and I think a lot of people have mentioned how in Cape Town it's quite difficult to get in. Yeah. And so it's been difficult to make friends with Cape Town people. It has taken years, and now and luckily now I have you, Rashid, as my Cape Town friend.
I do what I do.
But it's also interesting in talking about home, if home is a place, and deciding to make home here in Cape Town. To feel like I belong here has taken a long time. And so and sometimes I still don't understand how the city works, like what happens in different areas or how you pronounce different areas' names or whatever. And that's taken a while. And I think sometimes that gives me away when people are like, oh, okay, so you're not from here. Yeah. But it is an interesting question to live into. The question about, is home, is it a place or is it people, or how do we find belonging in a place when you are foreign? Yeah,
definitely. And I was going to say, do you think Cape Town particularly, like we have had quite a few conversations about how complicated the city is, it's a place of beauty and injustice at the same time. So do you think that that's part of the difficulty thinking about Cape Town's history of indigenous people, of settling, which is still, I guess, continuing today? Do you think that that's part of why you, as someone who's been here for 2 decades, I really didn't know it had been that long, because of your accent. I'm joking. But I'm wondering, do you think that that's part of that challenge of finding home here? Maybe in another place it would be a bit easier.
I mean, I don't know because I haven't tried to do that in another place. But I think part of it is I'm entering the story of Cape Town with my own stuff, my own story. And figuring that out has taken a while to understand what is it that is happening here that I'm stumbling upon. Although there's a common story for maybe the country like South Africa. But coming into Cape Town, there's also a very specific story about what Cape Town is and how it came to be. And so that is 2 decades worth of finding my way,
Yeah. So we have 2 really cool people. The one I've known for quite a few years. The other I literally met a couple of days ago, but he's a great guy. So I think it's safe to say that...
they're 2 good friends.
They're 2 good
Jury's
friends.
Jury's out on whether they're 2 good guys.
Wow. Charlton Alexander is a son of Cape Town. He loves his wife Lauren and his son Reth and the rest of the world in its beautiful brokenness. He's a tour guide / facilitator looking to move through the liminal spaces that tell us the stories of the people and the land. He invites guests to the city to connect with the people and the land in experiences that are life-altering. Charlie, as he is fondly known, has a deep desire to see local churches sing more local, contextual music rather than importing songs from the globe. He encourages this through dialogue, praxis, and contextual Bible studies.
Barry Lewis is the director of UBU, which stands for Ubuhle Baka Ubuhle, which means beauty builds beauty. UBU is a company specifically focused on developing the technology of sandbag housing in low-income communities in South Africa. Barry used to be an architect and he's from the UK, but he's been in Cape Town from 2009 and used to work for the Warehouse Trust before becoming the founder of UBU in 2012. Specifically working in an informal community called Sweet Home Farm in Philippi, which is where UBU first started. UBU played the role of facilitator in the City of Cape Town's UISP, or Upgrade of Informal Settlements program, in the community whilst developing the idea of the process house, an incremental model of housing utilizing sandbags and eco-beams, all built by members of the community over a 2.5-year period. UBU's mission is to activate and equip humans to self-build places of belonging in both formal and informal contexts. So welcome Barry and Charlie.
Welcome guys.
It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having us.
Let's get the elephant out the room. I said Philippi, and that's wrong. How do you say it, Charlie?
Philippi.
Philippi.
Okay. Apparently,
Philippi.
by some parts of Cape Town, that's how you say Philippi. So we're recording from Philippi today.
Nice.
At
learn
the headquarters. Hey Barry, the headquarters of Ubu. And so to start with, like we usually do, we like to try and understand how our podcast guests got to be here. So how did Ubu come to exist in Philippi in its current form?
In its current state.
Yeah.
So the truncated story, because no one wants the elongated one.
Yes.
No, we spent 10 years in Sweet Home Farm, and it was our base before things changed. There were some sad stories about different things, and so we had to leave. Sia, the community leader, had to leave, and so we were functioning under him, under his authority and under his leadership as the peace person, and so we had to make another plan. And this space came out of just relationship with an NGO called Cork, who we've partnered with for a number of years, and it's been a great blessing. So we ended up coming here during 2020, so it was great to get out of the house when you weren't really allowed to really get out of the house, but you know, to start building and doing something during COVID times was a great relief. And Ubu Home became a thing in Philippi.
Very cool. And the room we're recording in right now is a bit like a factory floor. This is like a production space.
Not like a factory floor. It is a factory space. So it's the room that we're in now has the industrial sewing machines. It's adjacent to the EcoBeam room where we manufacture the EcoBeams. So this room is where we make the sandbags. So there would be a bunch of people here folding, cutting, sewing, and there would be music, and there would be laughter, and there would be coffee.
Yeah. Very cool. And we have Charlie recording with us, and obviously you are not from Philippi. Well, I don't know, but you're not from Philippi. Which part of the city do you call home now?
Currently living in Coniston Park, Steenberg, which is a stone throw away from my grandparents' house. But grew up in, still growing, grew up in Westridge.
Yeah.
And this is kind of on the way from Westridge to Steenberg. In fact, our parents, when we were going to my grandparents' house on a Sunday afternoon or whenever, we would either come through Philippi or we'd take the beach road. And at that time, it felt like a long drive. Now it's like a lot faster. I feel like this is like a in between those two spaces. But we moved out of Mitchell's Plain to be closer to work for my parents. Well, that was the narrative, and I think there's lots of truth in that. But at the same time, a lot of the success stories is rooted in being able to move out of Mitchell's Plain.
It's interesting. There's also another connection in that the two of you are in the room together because you are friends. And so I know you have conflicting versions of how this happened. But why are the two of you friends? How did you become friends? Do you call one another friends? Let's start with that first.
I don't think we'd use the word friends, but definitely. I think I have a deep respect and fondness for Barry. As a colored boy, there's always been this distance from white males. And so I have a very high, they need to meet like a high standard to even be considered to be friends. Through hearing Barry's story and getting to know him, I think I do value him as a friend. And I think he has been doing lots of work and continues to do the work to hold that title and that space, and there's the safety that comes with it. I think he's given his life for this space and this city and this country to his own detriment, tangible detriment. So I do appreciate him. I've got lots of time for him.
That's good because he speaks long, so you need a lot of time.
Wow.
And he also seems to reciprocate the friendship, which I think is a very important piece. it would be weird, and I don't think our friendship would have been what it is now
Yeah.
if it was just a one-way street. I can name times where I'm like, yo, this guy's really come through for not just me, but for me and my family. Yeah, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. And Barry, on your side, I'm interested. One thing Charlie said is, for white males, they must meet a high standard. And I guess he described that as someone who's doing work of, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, but acknowledging their privilege. I know, Barry, obviously you coming from the UK and everything. Your relationship with Charlie, given his words, what do you think about him?
What do I think about Charlie?
Yeah.
So friendship is one word. I think I would use other words because we mentioned previously, like, my world has changed over the last few years. I used to be very extrovert and lots and lots of people in my worlds, and it got very small. And actually the people that are surrounded me are doing the work. They're the ones actually paying the price and doing the things. And I value that a great deal. So friendship, not so much. Brotherhood, a brother. I never had brothers. So if I find a brother, I'm going to hold on to him. Kinship, kin making, critical. We must make kin, and we need it because you can't exist in isolation. You know, forever dealing with my own potential disease of the Umulungu savior, you know, the white man's savior. You always have to understand your position and power and propensity for pain in any given space. And Charlie is a very good barometer. And you need it. You need things to be called into check, you know, to be checked. And he's very good. Just his very embodied presence will remind me, think I'm not quite on the mark here. I think I need to adjust something here. Or, you know, so, yeah, I can't, you know, in this world, in this current moment, I can't say enough about that type of human. It's like, you know, it's a heaven-sent human, and I need it. We need them because we need encouragement. And the fact that he goes off and does something and protests by himself, a thing, I'm like, yo, that's cajons.
Yeah.
We need it. And it's an encouragement. And what does encouragement do? Gives you courage.
It's awesome.
Brilliant. Lots of love in the room.
Yeah.
So we have this standard question that Rashid asks usually in our podcast.
But you go ahead. Right?
Do you want me to ask it this time? But it's this question around a story, or maybe a number of stories if you want, but a story that grounds you, which means a story that helps you make sense of the world or navigate the world or navigate your world. And we think that's always a nice question to ask because it helps us also understand a bit about you, but also maybe helps us to figure out our stories and how we navigate the world. And so if I ask that to you, maybe Barry, if you want to go first, what is there a story like that you think of, that you hold on to?
I think one story that helps to frame, and it's a good reminder for me, helps to frame my existence here, because you talk about being from not here, an alien. I'm definitely an alien, not from here. But the story of my relationship with South Africa has gone back a long way. I was born in Zim. My cousins here. I always had a footprint here. But that first memory of understanding the context was in 1987.
I was born then.
You weren't even alive.
I was born in January 1987.
Okay, so you were alive when this happened.
Just.
I was 10 years old. And as a church, we decided to go to Tivoli, which is a local cinema. Is it a cinema or a movie theater or a bioscope?
Charlie says bioscope.
Bioscope. And we went to go watch Cry Freedom. And it's a moment that I'll never forget. It's the story of Steve Biko, as everyone knows. And it was a seminal moment. It was, tears everywhere. So at the end of the movie, there's the story of many, many humans' names and the reasons why they died. ridiculous reasons like slipping up in the shower, knowing full well that they died in detention by other ways. But for me, it was the moment of understanding the song, the hymn, Nkosi Sikeleli. And it's a thing that grabbed me. It literally grabbed me. The song of protest, the song of gathering, the song of identity reminding. As a people, when someone would die, it was the only time when the humans were allowed to exist together in a mass. So the funeral became an important moment. But the song, it as a multi-layered thing, where everyone understood their role as bass or melody or harmony, or it was a community thing. It was it's just very powerful, and that sound grabbed me. It entered me somehow. Because the song and everyone knowing their role in the song, very powerful.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Charlie, do you have a story that you hold on to as a grounding?
The one that's in my mind at the moment is the one of driving from Mitchell's Plain to Steenberg, probably on like a Sunday afternoon, and at some point in time, sheets of paper being handed out and there being this family choir, and sitting there, hearing these people who almost belong together. Some obviously through marriage, and there was this warmth about being in the space. And I remember an uncle who was still around, always inviting us as younger people to kind of join in. And if I think about it now, there's like this encouragement to also participate, but to actually just do your thing. Like, you're welcomed. You can actually also take part in this. You can belong to what we're doing here. And there's something about that invitation to be part of something. So even when hearing, you feel like after 20 years, still like not sure where you sit with being part of Cape Town or not, and hearing Barry talk about being an alien and naming it that way. Like, I've tried to, in different ways, be a good host and welcome and draw people in rather than just like, I don't agree with you, like stay on the outside. I mean, that's happened a few times, but I think if I ask myself, like, what is it that I really want to continue doing, then it's definitely to commit with an invitation. There's things about Cape Town that some people will never get, and then there's things that you learn about Cape Town and you're like, I really appreciate this, or actually that's just so messed up, I don't want any part of it. And so I think it's important to create spaces of welcome and belonging, and even currently there's lots of videos going around of shootings happening on the Cape Flats, and like seeing it and hearing from people who are from those communities, like saying that currently it's really like a power thing within the gang system. People trying to get up the ladder and lead. But it's at the expense of other people being stuck now in their homes. All for wanting to be part of something, actually wanting to lead something that, while extremely unhelpful, helps people to belong.
You mean gangsterism?
Yeah.
In the sense of that. Yeah.
So wondering what the invitation needs to continuously be, and how we can keep our circles open rather than close, and how big the circles have to be for us to really flourish together, depending on what season we're in and the capacity that we have. I mean, I was saying I genuinely can count the amount of white male friends that I have that are really like, I would commit time. Like, I would no problem with giving time, but you also have to be good to yourself. Fortunately, like, the friendship with Barry's been mostly good.
Been a few moments. Probably soccer related.
Yeah. We won't talk about your soccer team. That question about you asked the question about like what should the invitation be is quite interesting, because Barry, you have this question about you're in this industry of building building houses. You'll critique this question about building houses, but I've heard you ask the question about housing delivery in general in South Africa, and what question is that answering? Are you building houses? Is that what Ubu does?
So when you see Silvertown, when you see a township, a newish township in Khayelitsha, and that's the solution, then we ask this question, what was the question that got you there? And it's very, very sort of engineer design based. It's very, even architect, it doesn't matter, but there's no distribution of agency. There's no sense of a bigger, wider story. You mentioned houses. Everyone says South Africa has a housing problem. No, we have a hauntological apartheid problem. The housing problem, no country in the world has built as many houses since 94 in South Africa. It's pretty efficient. It's just we don't necessarily agree with a praxis that builds these boxes for humans, where in Constantia they build the same technology to house their horses. So we have a home problem, not a housing problem. Yes, there are lots of people waiting, but there's also thousands and millions of houses that have been built. But has home been made? Are we building community? Are we reminding humans that they matter? Because actually, if you think about the hauntologies of apartheid, the legacies are one of marginalization. You don't matter. You're less.
Yeah.
You're less than. You are absolutely othered.
Yeah.
And how do we do that work? And I think that we have a job to do, to say, listen, the system tells you that this is who you are today. How do we do something different that reminds you that you're not that, and that you are beautiful, and that you matter, and that your work is a mattering? So yeah, we don't have the answers, but we are trying to ask different questions because we've seen some of the answers. And if another planner says to me, Barry, why are you crying about the kids playing in the street? Because they look like they're having fun in Khayelitsha as the cars drive past. I'm like, it's not good enough. It's singular, one-dimensional, even sometimes two-dimensional. It's a perpetuation of a violence. So Charlie talks about creating spaces. It's like, I think we have to create, yes, we talk about belonging, but the unpicking and the unpacking of belonging is expansive, because everyone has a version of that. And it might be a version based on lack. It might be, my own story of pain. But it probably looks something like safety. We want you to be welcome. The fullness of you. All of the parts of you. How do we create spaces where every part of you is welcome? So that you don't have to leave some of it behind, like you might in certain parts of the apartheid city.
Yeah. My experience of Cape Town has been something like that, where there are places you go where you do have to leave behind bits of yourself so that you can fit in.
Yeah.
And it's that idea of assimilation, I guess. Then you belong. Are those things opposite, mutually exclusive? You had an interesting thought, Rashid, about assimilation.
Yeah. I was also just thinking about what Charlie was saying earlier about, like, if you grew up in Mitchell's Plain and then you've now moved somewhere else. I have similar stories in my family of being in Manenberg. We're actually not too far from there. The elders, as we call them now, my dad and his 10 siblings, they've all moved out of Manenberg and kind of moved into a few different like places. I mean, Grassy Park or Zikufle and these kind of areas. There is a part of the idea behind that is like, yeah, no, we sort of made it out of there. And I wonder in that process, not necessarily thinking of my family, but just in general, in that process, if anything gets left behind, and if there's anything where, Barry, you described it as the apartheid city, maybe the colonially imagined city, if you move into other places, living or also just going for a walk in Constantia, are you forced to sort of assimilate towards something just by being in that space? I think assimilation is one of the most dehumanizing things. I always problematize it in churches and those kind of things. That conversation for another day. We should have that conversation. But yeah, I think assimilation is so dehumanizing. If you have to leave who you are behind, especially in places like church and whatever, the underlying story behind that is that God is not okay with your roots or your heritage or the fullness of who you are, which is why it's so dehumanizing and why it's so marginalizing as well. So yeah,
I think even growing up, there's this Afrikaans rhetorical question: "Hou jy vir jou wit?" Like that's the one that's
means like you think you're white.
Yeah, because you may be you're playing outside in the park and you actually go home to go and use the bathroom. You don't just go to the tree and something as simple as that would be questioned.
But like the other kids playing.
Yeah. So there's a whole spectrum of that. This aspiration to be something that you don't actually have to be. But I think the thing about assimilation that we need to maybe communicate more is that it's not your fault that you are trying to assimilate.
Yeah.
It actually says something about the community that you are in or the space that you're in.
Yeah.
In fact, the other day in Muizenberg, this guy was walking his dog without a leash and the dog came running at me. And we had to go at each other. I was like, "Can you put your dog on a leash?" And he was like, "Can you just be calm? It's going to be okay." And I was like thinking in my mind, like, white dude, you have no idea what this colored body has experienced when it comes to dogs. And so saying keep calm doesn't help the situation. And then I said, like, the conversation should have started and ended with you putting your dog on a leash because this is a public space. Like, we don't have to even talk. I'm not trying to be your friend or anything like that. You just have to do you so that I can also be me. I don't want to be calm around your dog. I just want to go from A to B. And yeah, it's like you wouldn't also have that in other spaces in our city. So it doesn't even have to be Constantia. It can simply be Muizenberg. But that's another story.
If we applied the framework of the questions, like what did you say to like what question is assimilation trying to answer? The colonial built city is a response to something. And what is that question?
I don't think you can have the conversation around assimilation without understanding the decades-long project. It goes back. You're entering a system that was designed. What must I do, or what must I change? What must be left behind in order for me to be accepted so that I feel like I belong? It isn't actually that. It's what do I need to do to make sure that that person feels safe with me being here.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's great. So it's not even belonging.
It's not belonging. It can never be. Assimilation is the embodiment of violence.
Yeah.
What must I do to change so that you feel more comfortable with me being here? That is a horror show. That is violence. And yeah, it's the antithesis of belonging. If you go into a place like CV and Constantia, it was my second worst place in Cape Town.
Constantia Village, bro.
I cannot.
There,
because you just need to you need to linger for a little bit of time before someone manifests the impatience. Just linger. And so I'm always reminded that, you know, waiting is not a violation of your human rights. But if you make someone wait, they will manifest if they must wait. And that's a good reminder. It's a good reminder. as if
So-
reminders are necessary.
Yeah.
But-
yeah. It's so I just want to say that waiting thing, it's such a crazy thing. My wife and I actually often talk about it, like just having a bit of patience. You're waiting in a line because you can actually see how, for example, racism can rear its ugly head
So
in
true.
simply waiting in a line.
So true.
We waiting to vote recently or something like that, and we actually went late, so we had a very short line. And then my wife was saying, like, you hear white people behind. I think you were also saying something similar, Tristan. I'm not sure. Like white people behind, not being like, oh gosh, we're waiting.
Yeah.
This is long. Then like the undertones of that is incompetence. And that incompetence is always framed,
Yeah.
at least in our context, through racism.
Yep.
It's like these black people, these colored people,
Yep.
they don't know what they're doing. I've heard that so many times. And it's such a simple thing. And I also I'm way more chilled. I think maybe I used to have, a little bit of that similar thing of like, no. But as I've, I guess, gone through a process of decolonizing myself and my own mind, I actually find beauty in just waiting and being like, yeah, it's beautiful humans in this line. It's cool. I'm not going to die. You know what I mean? I'm not going to die from just standing here. It's cool, yeah.
It's very liberating.
Yeah.
And so as you're telling that story, I was reminded of, for some reason, I still don't know, but my business banking is at CV, at Concentric Village, and I don't know why. I to this day, I'm like, why is it at that bank? So anyway, I started going, and you have to queue.
Yeah.
You have to queue to get to the counter. And so I would go in with my clock ready. I'd actually put a timer on. Second I go through the circular doors, I'd start the clock, and then I'd join the queue. And I'd wait to see how long it would take for a white person to moan about the queue. And
So funny.
I was going to swear then. I'm not going to swear. But basically, I literally, there was an amazing moment this one day, because normally it's like a minute and a half, to maybe 2 minutes. But this one day, I literally walked in and I heard it straight away.
It's so funny.
And it was like on the dot. It was like, and it was exactly what you said. Queues, like, there's not enough people serving us here.
Yeah, it's
Clearly, there's an inefficiency thing.
Yeah.
Rooted in what?
Yeah.
Rooted in what? Do you want to have a conversation around that?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It speaks also to a sense of entitlement. We entitled to this. And Charlie, you had reflected on this. That amongst our people, you're kind of just okay with what you get. Like we've almost been trained in that kind of way that you like, service is bad, but I guess that is what it is. So we'll just wait.
I mean, we have to also just keep checking ourselves. The day I voted, I also went late and voted like past 10 at night. But I realized it's actually not just the people that are doing like that are working here.
Of course,
There's a bigger system and thing.
Of course.
And then also I had to check myself, like be nice, say thank you, make sure you say thank you, because actually now these people are working late or later than they were planning to work. But I hate queues. So one of the things I appreciate about our Tuesday night dinner that we're part of is that people don't queue for the food; they sit around the table, and it
Tell
does
us more about that dinner.
So there's 2 community dinners that I know of happening in the city. One is at St. Peter's in Mowbray, which happens now every second Thursday, and the idea is that people come around the table and experience some kind of hospitality and generosity, but also equaling of power. That's why you don't queue for the food, and it's a really like good meal that you have, but also you're invited in to be yourself and to build some kind of community. And then there's now one in Muizenberg as well that happens on a Tuesday, that Barry and myself both get to be part of. And you don't have to wonder whether Barry's there or not. You'll hear him. But that's one of the things. I mean, it also depends. Like in some communities, you actually have to organize yourselves and have a queue so that people can. So that you can help people, and then you have some kind of privilege where you have a space where you can invite people in, sit down and try and do something a bit different. But I always have this thing about queues, like just because I don't like what it does to people. Not all people though. Some people it's good to, like you guys mentioned. It's good to have to question. And then hopefully there's someone in the room that jumps up and pushes back.
I wanted to reflect it just in terms of taking a step back and thinking about context of this idea of waiting, right? So yes, we all don't like queues and we all don't like having to wait for things, and it can be annoying and a waste of our time and everything. But I was thinking about it of like some other stories in the city. So one example, and I know there's probably thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these examples. But I think of like Protea Village, which is this little pocket that's just below Kirstenbosch Gardens. And there, I mean, people were forcibly removed from that area decades ago. And now, and people, you know, living in different places in the Cape Flats. And what people are doing, them and their kids and etc., they are waiting. People waiting, probably 90-year-olds, I'm sure there's some, who are waiting to be returned to that land, which would be what a just and good city would do. And when you go there now, because I like walking there with my doggy, and one day when I went there, I saw these big signs up, and they're basically signs, and they have a QR code and whatever, and they basically tell the story of this place. Before that, I always thought, oh, this is just like a beautiful place where you can walk your dogs, you know, like a nice green belt or whatever. And I saw these signs, and they explained, no, people are finally, after decades, coming back, right? And then we're like, cool, that's amazing, that's amazing. That, I think I first saw that sign up about 2 years ago. I think they are doing some building in a smaller pocket on the one area. But apparently the delays are because people in the neighborhood, which we're talking, it's like Bishop's Court, up at Newland somewhere, people are complaining about, no, this is an issue in terms of like nature. So basically...
When they say nature, they mean NIMBYism, but yeah.
So the reason people haven't gone back is because time and time again, neighbors, we're talking about being a good neighbor maybe, neighbors are saying, no, we don't want these people to come into into this neighborhood and to build whatever buildings or houses or homes would be built here. And it's just literally constantly, they're obviously rich because it's like one of the richest areas, lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. Then they lose that case. Then they say, okay, now we'll take it like a nature conservation angle. And then it's delayed. And all of this in the context of waiting in lines. You can't wait in a line for 20 minutes in the bank. But now people are waiting for decades, like 50 years, some people. That's just a little bit of context. That's why I was saying that for me, I'm like, just check yourself, because it's a level of humanity as well, and thinking of why are you more human than other people that you should, you know, that everyone must just answer to you. Yeah.
So in 2016, Barry and I did a course together. We were in a study cohort called Leadership in Urban Transformation. So shout out to that 2016 LUT cohort. And we had an amazing teacher, Stefan de Beer, who's done some really cool stuff in Pretoria. But as we were on the course, we interacted with, it was a theology-based course. We interacted with different reading materials, all sorts of different things.
Is this when you got radicalized?
This thing exploded my world. I think I mean, it's interesting to, if you think about, we spoke about this, the Moses moment in episode 1.
Yeah.
Episode
2,
Did I have a Moses moment? I think it was more like what Tandi was saying in that episode about a longer path.
Yeah.
But there was a significant
Something
moment in the cohort. And we had a lecture from Vuyani Velum, who's a black theologian from South Africa. And I know that he impacted you quite a lot, Barry, but also me. I mean, this was part of this undoing. And I'm wondering, in terms of the context of this conversation about belonging, Vuyani's paradigm around home in the city and who belongs in the city and that kind of thing. I wonder if we can bring that into the conversation. So maybe to start, maybe you can tell the story about that lecture that we had. Was it a lecture? It was a lecture or a talk that we had with that cohort.
Professor Velum,
yes. From the University of Pretoria at that time, yeah?
the late, great Professor Velum.
Yeah.
He had the voice of God. That was a seminal moment, certainly in my life. And it reminded me of actually one of my roles in the city. because I'm an alien.
Mm.
Like, this is who I am. And so you don't get to bring anything in.
Mm.
That is, you get to say that thing there is powerful. And he said something which has become something that I sit with every single day. And so he was just talking like he does, and he talked about the township, and he talked about pain and black pain, and and all those things. And then he used the word zinc forest, and I was like, what is that? Zinc forest.
Mm.
And he was referring to the informal community. I'd been in the informal community at Sweet Homes for about 7 years by then.
Mm.
And instantaneously, it helped shift and change my perception of the community. Now, I'd already been on a journey. It took me 5 years to realize, of going into the community every day, that maybe we're not dealing with a housing problem. Maybe we're dealing with a current solution to housing, because the people have done it for themselves.
Mm.
But then when you get this coined phrase, the zinc forest, now it's more than that. Now it's this growing, forming rootedness. There's a communication between trees. There's a communication. There's a chemical cues that happen between. There's a community and so it changed the lens. But also, there'd be other people like Gola who would say, yeah, but we don't do rose-tinted goggles. We don't make it sound like it's a pretty little forest.
Can't
It's
romanticize.
not.
Yeah.
But actually, if you understand the forest is death also, and life on death.
Mm.
The tree dies, becomes a new version of home for moss or anything else, for other critters. And so that very thin space between life and death is what this is about. But then he coined this phrase, which is something I talk about literally all the time. And this is the thing that made my whole insides fell out of my body. He said, the proliferation of the zinc forest is the prophetic building of the city. The proliferation of the zinc forest, the perpetual making of the zinc forest, is the prophetic building of the city. Now that, for me, was hugely significant. Using that phrase has been very helpful to think about maybe, so this is my thesis, I think. There are answers to building home and places of belonging in the context of the notional idea of the apartheid city, but I think they exist in the zinc forest. And I don't think we've sat there long enough to find out what they are. I think people have answers, but because the city reminds them that they're not equal, that they're not the same, that they're not as good, because they have to enter spaces and change themselves to make things comfortable. That's the type of city we're in. Why would they think that they carry the answers? And so I am firmly of the belief that we need to scratch the layers of zinc, the layers of social cognitive capital, the layerings, the remnants, the indeterminacies of the zinc forest, to give us an inkling idea of different ways of being and becoming in the notion of that sort of belonging space, that safety space. And let's not say, the informal community is not safe. We know that. And yet it's still a nurturing habitat. And we need to spend more time listening and paying attention to the details, because I think there are answers. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Velem. And that's an interesting thing of as a way of as we grapple with belonging, but other things as well, about how we approach solutions. That the solution is in what we defined as the problem previously. I was thinking about your dinner that you mentioned in a similar kind of way, that it's not a soup kitchen. It's answering a different question. The fact that there's no power dynamic or whatever, people showing up, there's no cues. And so again, we're back to that thing about like what the questions that we ask are very important.
So I would say in these two contexts, the two questions that we've been asking, or problems that we've been trying to address, is one, people need houses, maybe not homes, maybe we don't frame it as homes, and the other, we have hungry people and people need food. How can we do that? Are you guys suggesting that those two questions are maybe unhelpful? Because if we have a house and we have food, then we're like, nah, now you almost deal. You've got everything. Is that perhaps what you're suggesting, that the questions that we've been asking or the problems we've been trying to solve are not, it's not that that's not a part of it, but maybe it's not the fullness?
I think we need to be dogmatic about this. We need to be forthright, and we have to be intentional. And those questions, you know, one of my favourite closer phrases is "fuck 'em, man." We need to put them in the bin. They've served their time, and they've served no one. And we need to. It's too basic. And if you listen to Samuel from New Hope, listen to him talk about what is necessary for someone to go through a journey of getting out of homelessness. It is a multifaceted, connecting narrative. It's a multi-connecting, relational thing. It's not about food or, you know, I just need a job. It's multi. Of course, It is multiple. And I think, you know, in the same way that the apartheid city has erased, we need to get aggressive with some of the very lazy and, you know, questions that just are not generating anything new. We have to call it, you know, as an architect, as a designer of the city, if it's not working, then don't do the same thing. Stop it. Immediately. Fuck it and comment now. We need to think differently, which is why I think thinking in more than human realms is helpful. Think beyond just the fact that I'm a designer thinking about a human and we can have 2 bedrooms and it's like, no, we've got to, you know, we've been given a whole world. So go to the forest, listen to the forest, hug a tree, learn, you know, and do some research, because there are answers. And I love that, because actually if we enter those worlds, it can actually be fun and generative. But let's do away with the nonsense now. No, man.
I don't like the word homeless. And the reason why I don't like it is not because I feel weird about it. It's just a very lazy term. You ask someone who's living in Muizenberg, like, where's home? And they'll tell you. So they're not homeless. They just don't have a house. They don't have enough resources to rent or buy or whatever. But the thing about the dinner is hearing people ask you, like, is there going to be meat tonight, or is it vegetarian, right? And I would probably confidently say that if next week we decide that we don't have funds and so we can't provide a meal, and people are there, they might be disappointed. But if you invite them back the next week with the expectation that there still won't be a meal, some of them will come back. I'll surely go back, not because of the meal, but there's contact time with some people in the community. So there's a few things that are happening. Like I was saying, it's not just about the food, but it also is about it in some ways. And so people are finding like a rhythm. One of the comments coming out of the Thursday one that's happening every second week, people who are attending saying, let's keep it every second week. That way we know the quality of the food is going to remain really good, because it is like a really good meal. Whether it's vegetarian or not, the food is being paid for really well. The people who are working with it, the land, all of those things. And that's what then comes out. People are acknowledging that. Recently, Alan Story spoke about one of the difficult things about Cape Town and other parts of the world as well, is that in the Exodus story, they leave, right? They leave Egypt. And so they don't have to deal with Egypt, even though some of them take it with them and they want to return and all of those things. In the Cape Town story, we still here. And so now we need to do that work of, like, the things that don't work, how do we get rid of it? And the things that we need, how do we bring that to life? How do we create that? How do we build that? That's different to what people have experienced years ago.
I like where we're going with that, the imaginative. But I think one of the answers, or a hint at some of the answers, we're not about answers here, but I think, Barry, your thing about those questions about if we say houses and food, and you said they don't serve anyone, but they do serve somebody. Right, they serve they serve people where we can go and do this thing, then we feel good about ourselves, and then we can move on, because now we've answered that question, so we don't have to think about it anymore. And I think that's how do we usher in a new something new? How do we? A part of it, I think, is about creating new questions and being willing to stay there for a little bit longer than quickly jumping to the answer. And so you both are already in these in-process spaces, almost involved in the meals and even in the self-build process. But are there places or other places where you see just those, what Rashid talks about, glimmers, or what I talk about, gaps in reality, glimmers at this new imagined future, a different thing altogether? Are there stories or places, or maybe even questions that you have that can help us think about that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Charlie? No, like for me, I'm like, as you speak, I'm like, for me, it's the kelp forest.
Yeah.
It's a place of glimmer. It's like, Bayo Akomolafe talks about the cracks and the spaces in between, and within that, the opportunities.
The kelp forest being under the water.
In the
ocean.
In the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah. And literally learning recently about, because I got slightly obsessed with the notion of the holdfast, which was the base of a kelp. So you have the blades at the top, then you have the stipe, which is the stem, and then you have this rooted system at the base connected to rock. It's an algae. It's not like a tree. So you see the roots above the rock.
It's not connected to the sand like the bottom of the ocean.
Just connected to the rocks. But it could be connected to another kelp, or it could be connected to a pipe, or it can grow anywhere.
I see, yeah.
Which is quite amazing. It can grow anywhere. There's another thing. But the idea of getting slightly obsessed with the holdfast, but not knowing why, and then my friend Nazreen Peer, Dr. Peer from Stellenbosch University, going, why? She's a marine biologist, and then because it says something about the zinc forest, because the zinc forest is already part of my language by then.
Yeah.
But I don't know why, and so she goes away, does some research, realizes that no one's done any research on the holdfast really in South Africa, finds some money, and spends 2022 doing some research and realizing that if you take 40 holdfasts out the sea from 4 different sites, there's 200 different species of life that exist within this seemingly solid mass of rooted system. Because you look at it, you touch it, it's solid, and then you realize, no, it's full of animals, it's full of critters. And that was an extraordinary sighting, but more exciting was that they were all juveniles, they were all babies. And so from a scientific perspective, they were saying, this is an example of a nurturing habitat. And so now we say, well, what can we learn about this nurturing habitat? Because I was connecting it back to the zinc forest, and I'm like, well, I kind of know that that's a nurturing habitat. So now can we start to speak and play them through each other? Because even the notion of something new, the notion of newness is a problem. Is it new? Like, nothing's new. But what can be generated when you maybe feed one through another, like you diffract it through each other? So you don't reflect it. You don't say, well, that's similar to that, and that's similar to that. You don't play that game. But how can we understand things like the whole, because there could be 17,000 different other versions of that. But this was just untapped information. And the minute you then find out about this holdfast phenomenon, you then go, well, hold on a minute. This baby brittle star existed in its mother, and at some point it got spewed out, the bursal slit, and the big mummy brittle star is too big for the holdfast. So then how did it get from the mummy to the inside of a holdfast? And like, no one knows. How did the babies get in there? No one knows. And so all it does is just open up a whole new realm of questions. What must we know? What must we understand? You know, Dr. P would say, well, maybe there's a chemical cue. Maybe it gives off a signal or a sign or something. Maybe it's just by chance. No one knows. But I'm not going, that's amazing. You drop that back into the zinc forest and you say, well, you know, in a way, there's a lot of death. But then you say, well, actually, there's also a whole lot of life. And there are some amazing stories that have emanated from that place. And, you know, as I walk through Sweet Home Farm every week, as I do, there's always a child walking around going, and how is that child connected to multiple humans? And they are. Mamakahu, Tatakahu, all connected. Nurturing habitats.
That's beautiful. Anything from you, Charlie?
I mean, I don't I don't have answers. But I think in my recent work as a tour guide, I think there's some spaces in our city that we need to name more. And there's some people doing work that we need to connect more. I mean, there's this lots of underfunded, really amazing projects that people are, like, if you had to ask Jonathan Jansen in Manenberg, like why are you doing this? Then it's like, I have to do this. If you have to ask Cecilia, like, what led you to making this film? And she was like, there was no one else doing it. I just had to do it. Like, and I think that's part of the question. What is it that you have to do? Without needing to do it, like this is the thing that you feel deeply, what's the word? Convicted to do, that you would give your life for, because that's what people have done. They've given their lives. You talk about Steve Biko and you think about these people who've been part of the struggle, like literally they gave their lives. We don't always literally have to give our life, but sometimes it's going to cost us that much. And I think there's a seriousness about that invitation when you ask, what is it that you have to do? That cuts through funding proposals and resources and this really amazing plan, because it jumps to where and what it is that we have to do. And we have to create different spaces. We have to do things differently.
It does make me think. It's a really good point. It does make me think about two things. One is, what is the landscape for actually just trying different things? It reminded me of this quote, and I'm talking about the landscape of embracing mistakes, embracing failures. It's very colonial, isn't it, to get things right. We've got to get it right. And I've always been scared of making mistakes, but it's just like, no, how about that doesn't matter if you make it. So I read this recently. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that some things are worth doing, even if they don't work out. It's like, it's worth doing it. We've got to try it. We might fail. Would we not do it if we knew we would fail? Or was it worth it? So I'm like going, my mission, I think, is, I don't know if this is going to work. I would love to see a paradigm of multiple humans building for themselves, making their choice, training, incrementalism, going double stories, doing the things. We might spectacularly fail. But wouldn't it be fun if we just tried? Because it matters. But the other thing is, would you do the things? Would you play your role? Would you do your bit? And it changed something. It shifted something in the city, but no one knew that you did it. Would you do it? That, for me, is a question that helps flush out the Umlungu saviors. Because the Umlungu saviors, they need to be seen. And there are times when I need to be seen. I'm doing a good thing. We're doing the progressive work. Well done. Yeah. Well done. Go home. Would we do the work that changed the world, but no one knew that we did it?
And we may not even see the benefits of it in this generation, or what's it now, Gen Z. Will probably be long after that. But we need to play our part in that. because I think there's enough people in the city that are doing what they have to do, which is really like life-changing and important. And I say life-changing meaning like I'm going to have to give up this thing so that I can do that thing. Like, yes, my family needs to be okay, but sometimes I'm going to have to do certain things regardless of the needs of my family. And that's what people are doing. But what does that mean for us that are here, whether we're from East London or the UK, or actually just deal from Cape Town? Because we can all play a part in that, right? It's just, are we willing to do what we have to do?
That's good. Well, thank you, Charlie and Barry. That was a really great conversation.
That was really good.
Feel inspired. Fun.
Yeah, fun.
That's the end.